Street Fighter 6 has a lot of incredible stages. The work put into them visually is evident even in matches, and looking at them outside of the fighting, there's a lot of details to appreciate at a standstill. The way certain objects shake or fall down naturally or as a result of a knockdown, the monkeys being chased by the shopkeeper in Old Town Market, or the fact that you can see Guile in the background of carrier Byron Taylor if he isn't being played as. Background elements shifting between rounds or in response to enough fighting happening is a subtle but endearing detail that you probably won't even notice when you're getting throw looped. The newest stage at the time this script is being penned is Pow Pow Cafe 6, and it's one of the best in the game purely for the fact that it displays just how big of SNK fanboys the SF6 development team are. The various background characters from SNK games alone are proof of that. However, while these stages are great, there's an interesting question to be posed. If you were to strip away all the details in the back and foreground and change the stage into a black void, what is the difference between all these stages? Fete Forain or Ranger's Hut are distinct in their visuals, but if we take those away, what exactly makes them any different from the Grayscale Training Mode stage? The answer is nothing. And that's okay, because in the interest of making sure the environment is as fair to both players and their characters as possible, making every stage the exact same in terms of design is totally reasonable. Many fighting games are like this, and I'm not trying to imply it's a bad thing. All of these games could have launched with a single stage that's just a generic grid training mode stage, and for the most part, nothing would have really changed. The fact that developers put so much effort into creating multiple stages with varied backgrounds is a sign of passion that's worth the praise, and they often go above and beyond in detail. However, thinking about this got me pondering on some games where the stages aren't just backgrounds and are instead made to be interacted with by the players and the characters. Sure, the theoretical most efficient way to make sure both players' skill is fairly tested is to remove anything that distracts from the two characters they're using, but sometimes the more fun route is to just let the players go ham with the environment around them. And believe it or not, sometimes doing that isn't even a particularly complicated manner. Something as simple as merely increasing the distance between corners for different stages, such as in JoJo Heritage for the Future or Mortal Kombat 9, can make a big difference, but some devs get way freakier with it. So, with that said, y'all ever played Aggressors of Dark Combat? No relation to Mortal Kombat, of course. This is a weird game. What we have here is sort of like if you took the Streets of Rage 2 duel mode and put the developer's entire focus on the fighting aspect. You always face your opponent, but you can move in all 8 directions and you have a dedicated jump button along with the punch and kick button. Admittedly, it isn't the most precise or smooth experience, but it certainly is unique. What really interests me though is the weapon mechanic. Obviously the developers knew the best part of beat-em-ups is finding a metal pipe and bashing skulls in with it, because Aggressors of Dark Combat features a similar system where you can pick weapons up off the ground and smack the opponent with them. Items come in the form of a Molotov cocktail you can throw and a few different kinds of melee weapons, a shovel, a katana, and a baseball bat fitted with barbed wire. Now normally I wouldn't consider this to count as stage interaction, but the interesting thing about ADK's weapons is that they aren't just randomly spawned over the course of a fight. That does happen though. During matches, a man and a woman, the same man and woman, would drop by to toss weapons or Molotovs respectively, which is kind of hilarious to imagine these two presumably unrelated people traveling to a bunch of street fights to supply the people fighting with weapons. However, weapons can also be found inside of certain breakable objects in the stages. What kind of objects you find and how many varies based on the stage. It might be a cactus, or a trash can, or this innocent train conductor you can punch into non-existence. Certain stages also have elements of interactivity that exist outside of these items, for example, the taxi in Bobby's stage which you can jump onto. This is admittedly not what most people would call a traditional fighting game, so perhaps you might not think it's entirely relevant to the topic, but when am I ever going to get the chance to talk about this game? If you know anything about it, it's most likely the insanely cursed Jealousy Bomber Super, but trust me, just about every aspect of this game is hilarious. One of the most simple manners of playing around with the stage in a 2D game is the lane change system from the Fatal Fury series, which allows characters to move into the background of a stage to attack or dodge. It's pretty cool and iconic to the series, to the point of being referenced in one of Terry's target combos in SF6. However, I'd like to talk about a game that features a similar mechanic with a very different method of implementation. Savage Rain, which is the predecessor to Kizuna Encounter, and unlike that game, this doesn't have a tag system. Seems like standard fare at first. You've got some buttons, some specials, typical stuff. The lane system, though, is the real standout mechanic. Essentially, every stage has 2 different planes and you can switch between them at any time by pressing a button. If you're feeling bored of the top lane, hop onto the bottom lane for a new dimension of attack. There's a lot of interesting details to this system. First off, both players do not have to be in the same lane to fight. If one throws a projectile at a character in another lane, the projectile will actually head for that lane, allowing you to attack even if you're not on the same part of the stage. Also, your different methods of lane transitioning act as attacks themselves, which lets you potentially intercept a character trying to shift from one lane to the other. The most unique stages are the ones belonging to Chung and Eagle, because their stages' second lanes have poles you can hang on to, during which your attacks and mobility are slightly more limited. Worth noting is that the stages also have hazards to deal with, like the Cars and Carol stage. It's a pretty sick mechanic and it makes for very dynamic fights. JoJo's Bizarre Adventure All-Star Battle R has lots of cool details in regards to its stages. I get asked to talk about the characters in this game a fair amount, and I may or may not do that at some point, but this game goes a long way in being faithful to its source material, and the arenas in which you fight are certainly no exception. For example, a handful of the game's cast members are denoted as stone mask characters, and these characters are unable to be used in stages that take place during the daytime normally, although there are ways to get around this. Anyway, what I want to talk about is the game's stage hazards, which are known in-game as arena gimmicks, which is a delightful name by the way. Every stage has one hazard that will activate once a character is knocked into the activation area, which takes the form of a big ol' circle on the ground. Some are objects which appear from different areas, such as the chandeliers in Dio's mansion that drop from the ceiling or Wilson Phillips' car in Cairo. Others are instead attacks performed by characters off screen or in the background, like Dio throwing knives on the Cairo bridge, although it's worth noting that actually playing as the character who's part of the gimmick on that stage will disable it. So for example, the stage gimmick involving Dio won't work if someone is playing as Dio. There are some more unique ones. The Coliseum gimmick, for example, will increase the amount of damage that both characters do, while the one in the Philadelphia stage will simply supply characters with more meter. This one is also special in regards to the fact that it won't activate until one character drops below 50% HP. ASBR's arena gimmicks are toggleable, and the typical tournament rule set for this game tends to set them to off, which is reasonable as they are very obstructive. A lesser-known Capcom fighter you might not have heard of is Ring of Destruction, which notably features Mike Hagar as a playable character. This is a really sick game themed after pro wrestling, and because of that, every stage is designed to be like a wrestling ring. And of course, that means ropes that you can interact with over the course of a match. You can run into them and attack, or toss your opponent into them and bounce them off, which is cool as hell and satisfying to boot. Tekken is a series that even to this day is committed to differentiating its stages with interaction. In Tekken 8 there are stages with breakable walls, balconies, and floors. Some have one or two of them, and some don't even have any of these at all. In saying that, there are some really cool and experimental stages from the older games in the series. Notably, Tekken 4 had a concept for its stages that I think is really interesting, which is uneven terrain. This is done either through naturally occurring ascending and descending surfaces, or through actual structures built onto the ground, such as ramps or even stairs in the case of the mall stage. Throwing someone off of stairs certainly isn't as over the top as smashing them through a wall or over a balcony, but it is just as funny. Something to note about Tekken 4 is that it also had many stages with walls, which was a new thing for this series. It was also pretty broken, but that's what happens when you introduce a new gimmick, I guess. I believe this game's varied stage hazards were pretty controversial back in the day, which probably explains why the series now doesn't really experiment with such ideas. While we're on the subject of 3D fighters with uneven stages, Virtua Fighter 3, which predates Tekken 4, also comes to mind. Like with Tekken 4, many stages in this game contain stairs or bumps in the terrain. My favorite is the stage that takes place over water. Not only is the raft you're fighting on rocked by character movement, but there's also a boat near the raft that you can climb onto. How much VF players like this stuff is beyond my knowledge, but I think it's pretty cool. On the subject of VF, it and Soul Calibur both feature one of my favorite stage mechanics, ring outs. Both of these games have stages with edges that characters can be knocked off of. In the case that it happens, it's an instant loss regardless of health. It makes for some antsy as hell corner play, and it's really hype when it happens in a match, especially since it's such a quick tie turner. A juggle into a ring out can offset even the biggest of life deficits, which is always cool to see. I recommend Core A's 2D vs 3D video, which goes into some of the intricacies of stages in games like Tekken and VF. Those 3D games actually aren't the only instances of a ring out system, as a similar mechanic exists in Real Bout Fatal Fury. I brought up that series' lane system, but Real Bout also features ring outs which occur if a character is knocked off the stage. Certain stages have breakable objects that need to be destroyed before these ring outs become accessible, so you'll have to work for some of them, but the results are definitely worth it in some cases. To cap this video off, I want to talk about Injustice, which is the series that inspired this topic. However, before we get to that, I think it's important to touch on its sister series, Mortal Kombat. All the way back in this series' early days with Mortal Kombat 4, the devs were experimenting with stage interaction. Sprawled across some of MK4's stages are throwable objects that do a shitload of damage on hit. You can pick them up and huck them at the opponent, a very simple system that would go on to be expanded in future endeavors. Mortal Kombat Deadly Alliance featured some stage hazards, such as the acid bath where Buddha statues fire out pools of acid that will do damage as long as the character is stood in the pool. Deception and Armageddon, though, really went hard on this concept. These games have stage transitions, allowing you to send opponents into lower or higher parts of a stage with uppercuts, and some stages have weapons you can pick up or active stage hazards like the captives in Dark Prison. The big addition, though, was death traps, which are essentially the same as Virtua Fighter and Soul Calibur's ring outs, except, excessively gory because it's MK. Easily the most interesting stage to manifest from these ideas is Falling Cliff. Here, the setting is a mountain which slowly but surely crumbles to pieces, causing the actual arena to shrink in size as the fight drags on. It's particularly precarious because there's a death trap below the main platform, making any fighting done on this stage extremely nerve-wracking. Evidently, even the developers knew this stage was an absolute banger of an idea for this game, because it was in both Deception and Armageddon. Anyways, now let's get to the Injustice series. Injustice system of stage interactions is known as Interactables, a name that certainly favors descriptive simplicity over anything else. Some of the modern MK games by NRS have this system too, but I personally always associated it more with Injustice, and in my opinion, it's definitely more of a developed system in Injustice. How it works at first doesn't seem that different from the throwable stage hazards in MK4, where you can toss objects located around the stage at the opponent, and there are many interactables that act as simple projectiles that the characters can throw. It works pretty simple, and they tend to do pretty good damage. The fun part is that many of the interactable objects that can be thrown are fully unblockable. If you've ever seen that Batman dumpster clip, you know exactly how fucked up this system can be, but if you haven't, all I can say is, he ain't gonna sugarcoat it. This one in the Gotham stage is particularly infamous as the massive size of the actual dumpster allows for extremely oppressive corner traps that are very difficult to escape and guaranteed combo damage because, well, you can't block it. However, the system goes much deeper than this. Characters in this game are divided into 3 categories. There are power types, gadget types, and acrobatic types. Gadget and acrobatic types are able to slide the dumpster in the Gotham stage across the floor, but power type characters will throw it, destroying it and removing it from the stage. While some interactables are used in the same manner by all 3 types of characters, many of them do not act this way. Sometimes the distinction is in how a certain obstacle is removed from the stage, or if it's removed at all, like this planet structure in the Hall of Justice stage. Gadget characters will plant an explosive on the object, causing it to blow up, and acrobat characters will jump off of it and perform an attack. This one doesn't destroy the structure at all. Power type characters will of course just throw it. Gadget and acrobat characters are able to use certain interactables to escape the corner, but power type characters can use them for offense, either by simply smashing the opponent into it or tossing it like a projectile, which leaves both characters without the ability to use it again. There are also interactables that take the form of objects in the background that you can bounce the opponent off of, allowing for combo extensions. There's a lot of variance in the system, and it makes for plenty of interesting matchups, as stage choice and character type can matter a lot. Also important, stages have multiple layers with stage transitions acting as a bridge between them, a la the older MK games, leading to sections with more hazards in each layer. The rest of the NRS games after Injustice feature similar systems for the most part, but it's definitely at its most comical in the original Injustice. Now, before I end things off, I want to talk about the coolest extension of the entire NRS interactable mechanic. In Mortal Kombat X, there's a character called Tremor. Every character in this game has 3 variations, each of which changes their specials and some properties of their kit. Tremor's Crystalline variation has a move where he summons a giant crystalline rock from the ground, and this rock is an interactable. He can jump off of it or throw it as a projectile. Essentially, he can create his own stage hazard, which is insanely cool and just the kind of creativity I appreciate. So, we've reached the end. I think I managed to talk about a good variety of different types of stage hazards, stage diversity, and interactive stage mechanics. Fighting game stages in many instances are just backgrounds that can be switched onto the same arena, but in many instances that's not true, and I think it's pretty cool how many different devs have experimented with this idea. I know some of the communities for these games have people who greatly detest this kind of mechanic, so I'm curious what you all think. Do newer games like Street Fighter 6 or Guilty Gear Strive need unblockable dumpsters for the characters to smack each other with? Let me know. Thanks for watching, have a great night, and take care. Hey everyone, first of all, Happy New Year. It's been a little bit of time, but obviously holiday break, I was taking the chance to relax, but I'm back and I've got lots of stuff planned for the year, so I hope you'll all tune in. With that being said, this is time for my favorite part of the video, which is thanking all my wonderful, beautiful channel members who I all wish a very, very happy, bountiful 2025 upon. So thank you, Old Man Han, Cammy the Killer, Jawsba, Mortis, Arg Seals, Wormy, Terry Hints, Perfect Orange, Pet Shop from Fortnite, Happy the Hap Hap, HPHK, Gundog92, Isaac the Collector, Gerald Say, Sonic Frontiers is a good game, Loop Zoopler, Loose, and Kira the Stowaway. Thank you all so much for the support. It means a lot to me, and I hope I can continue to entertain you into 2025 and beyond. With that said, thank you. I love you all. Have a wonderful night. Take care.